A creature from space watched too many American TV programs. A backwoods man who spoke an unearthly language. And the most singular events which occurred in the hovel on the alley off of I Street. You'll read about all of them and many more in this fascinating collection of stories by Hugo Award winner Avram Davidson, one of the most original and accomplished writers of modern-day science fiction. So I have a warning today. Don't go out in the woods. Don't walk down streets nearby to woods where the branches overhang the street. Just be careful around trees, any trees, even the ones that line the streets. Be especially careful of any grouping of trees as you might find in a park or nearby to a playground. If there are more than 3 or 4 trees standing close together and you walk close to them, you will be taking a risk. This is the guidance from our mayor following her consultation with the new sheriff and the town council. The headline on the Stonesway Herald put it more simply in big, bold black letters: "Stay away from trees." But why, you might wonder? Well, I'll tell you what I know. Tilly Umbertson was last seen in the park on Arbor Avenue. That's the one practically carved out of the woods at the base of Blackwood Hill on the town side. It's actually called Arbor Park, although maybe most people don't know that because most people don't go to that park. The park is neglected. There's moss on the roof of the picnic shelter. The swings creak and the seats are covered in lichen. The park is overhung by trees, overshadowed by the hill itself. It's damp in the spring and fall. In the summer, although shady, it's very rare to see anyone in the park. The sound of tree frogs is abnormally loud, even during the daytime. They seem to shriek, and the sound seems to echo from tree to tree. It's possible to forget that the park is so close to town. It can seem like the trees are closing in. Tilly Umbertson was last seen in Arbor Park. 3 kids riding their bikes past the park saw her. She was walking near the edge of the woods, and then suddenly it seemed like she was floating in the air. Except she wasn't. Something had grabbed her from above. Something had pulled her up. Her legs dangled and kicked. She was wearing white stockings. The kid who said this seemed embarrassed by this detail. At first, the kids thought it must be a giant spider that had pulled her up because they were kids and that's what kids would imagine. But then they saw it was figures, like monkeys or monkey men, except one of the kids said, "They didn't look really real. They looked like shadows." While the kids were looking, it seemed to them that the shadows saw them. 2 or 3 of the shadows raised their heads and looked toward the kids, and then, as swift as any shadow, they came leaping and running for the kids. But the kids got away. They didn't know it, but they did exactly the right thing. They rode their bikes into the sunshine and away from any trees. Of course, nobody in town knew at that point that the trees were the source of the problem, and not only in that park, so we had to learn by a sort of trial and error. Janelle Tyler lost her Pomeranian beneath a silver maple and nearby to several birches in a backyard on Birch Street. She barely escaped with her own skin, she said, and she could feel their fingertips digging into her skin, but she twisted from their reach and ran like the wind, again into the sunshine. In all, in town, at least 4 dogs have been taken, as well as Tilly, and there have been attempts on at least 2 more people. Janelle and a very large fellow we all know as Mike, just Mike, not Big Mike, mind you, who says they tried to lift him from a bench in Grogan Square, but they seemed to have trouble, and anyway, he was able to swat away their hands, like so many horseflies. He was sitting beneath the oaks in Grogan Square, but these are spaced pretty widely apart, and depending on the time of day, sunlight often separates them. So now it seems we're beginning to understand how these things work. They depend on shadow for their strength and probably their substantiality. They can reach anywhere the shadow of a tree can reach. We don't know anything about their motivations. We don't know where they take their victims. Once they pull their victims into a tree after the brief struggle that ensues, there is nothing there, not even the shadows themselves, at least for a little while. The victims disappear along with the shadows that took them. We don't know where. For all we know, Tilly Umbertson is still alive, and we could save her if only we knew where to look. But we don't. So what do we do now? It's still spring. The trees are already budding out. Soon there will be leaves on the trees, and with the leaves, thicker shadows, bigger shadows. And when summer comes, longer days, longer shadows. We don't know what to do. Okay, so now we've started carrying flashlights. A student at Greenwood College said the shadows came for her, but she thought to flash her cell phone light at them, and they cowered away, giving her time to run. So now we all carry flashlights, and we keep our phones handy. A group of us is heading to Arbor Park at noon, armed with all the flashlights we can carry. I have just returned. We found Tilly. She's in a state of shock. She giggles, but she hasn't spoken yet. Our flashlights devastated the shadows. They fled from us. We found Tilly at the back of the park. She wasn't there, but then she was. She was sitting in a tree, dangling her legs and giggling. The dogs were all further up the tree, each to a branch, barking frantically. We could only see and hear them when we shined our lights on them. We called the volunteer fire department. They carried Tilly and each of the dogs to safety. We must keep Tilly and the dogs in brightly lit rooms now, or they start to fade away. We have not solved the problem of the shadows, but at least we seem to have gotten a handle on the problem. I've heard some people worrying now that the shadows will evolve in response to our efforts. What if they move from the shadows of trees to other shadows? What will we do then? I've started sleeping with a flashlight in my hand and the lights on. That may be the easy part. I worry about my dreams and even my daytime thoughts. Isn't thinking a kind of light? I wonder what's around us in the dark.